Selamat pagi semua, nama saya Brenton. I went to Indonesia SST last spring.
Buenos días, me llamo Kate Boddicker y en la primavera pasada yo fui a Ecuador.
Good morning and welcome to the SST Convo, where we're going to try and sell you on SST and all of the many, many reasons it's a unique and worthwhile program. And we could just list out all the reasons to make SST great, but I'm sure you've heard it before. So we have an amazing lineup of students that are going to share short stories from their experiences from the past year. We have stories from both Indonesia and Ecuador, and we hope that by bringing these many stories together, we can paint an accurate picture of what's in store for you when you sign up for SST. And look at that. So along with our speakers, we've also reached out to other SST students to share a favorite picture and a short blurb. So this snapshot comes from the end of my service. My family threw me a grand party with dancing and singing, and they surprised me with a cake that called me their lil bro. And they didn't call me lil bro once when I was there. Anyways, these types of slides will show up as we transition to speakers, so please read through them and see what your peers have pulled from their experiences.
So, some quick background on SST for the freshmen and the unfamiliar. It started back in 1986, so it's quite the long-standing tradition. SST stands for Study Service Term, and it's called that because SST is split into two halves. In a semester abroad format, which will be the focus of this convo, you spend the first 6 weeks with a host family, studying with your SST unit. Study on SST means learning language in a classroom, but it also means taking field trips to historic landmarks, workshops to learn traditional art and dance, and processing the experience together as a class.
In the last 6 weeks, the service portion splits the group into pairs and sends you to a new area of the country where you'll apply your new skills and give back to the community. It sounds scary, but the service placements that GC chooses are very purposeful and helpful for the students. And for my service, I went to Kupang, which is an island away from Indonesia, and worked at a university teaching English.
And I worked with local sustainability and reforestation efforts. As part of global citizenship, one of GC's 5 core values, SST is a requirement for all students. The main format, and the one that we highly recommend because of its level of immersion, is the semester abroad, which is 13 weeks long. There are also sequential SSTs that normally take place in the 3 weeks of May term, and they'll be getting their own convo with a focus on that in the spring. So we're going to focus on the semester SSTs today. And certainly you do learn on those shorter experiences as well, but it is hard to get the full immersion because of the length. So you can always do both, though. I myself have now gone on 3 different SST courses offered by Goshen, a semester, and also 2 different May term trips.
And the final thing about SST is that you go on a group with your peers and are led by a faculty member. These people, your friends that you already know and people you haven't met before, will become a source of support for you. Living in a foreign country, learning a foreign language is difficult. So having people that share in the same experience and can process it with you is a special thing unique to SST.
These are the 5 locations that GC offers for Semester Abroad SST. Each has their own focus and rotations of when they're available. Aside from Ecuador that's offered every year in spring and May summer, the other locations are offered every other year. So coming up soon, in the next couple years, will be Tanzania this spring, as well as the Navajo Hopi SST, Ecuador this summer, Ecuador next spring and fall, Indonesia next spring, and Ecuador next summer. So be sure to plan ahead. In the past, they've had to cancel SSTs because not enough people signed up for them. And it's really messed up people's schedules, graduations, things like that. So make sure you're getting on top of it and letting people know early when it is that you're planning to do SST.
We'll go over how to sign up for SST and what financial aid is available after the speakers, but with all of that business out of the way, let's give a round of applause to our first speaker, Ellie Nickel from Ecuador Spring.
Hi guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ellie, and I was part of the group of 18 students that went to Ecuador last spring. Unlike a lot of my classmates, SST was not something I grew up hearing about. My parents did not go to Goshen, and so they weren't given the same opportunity for cross-cultural studies like we have here at GC. Because of this, I didn't really know what SST meant or what kind of experience this would look like, especially as someone whose identity is largely defined by my friends and family, something I would be taking a large physical step away from by traveling to South America. As I went through my first year of college, I was more fully introduced to the concept of SST and warmed up to the idea of life in another country, even if only temporarily. This excitement was shared by a number of my friends, and we formed a hesitant plan of when and where we would go. Spring semester of our sophomore year, we would go to Ecuador. Encouraged by the fact that my group of friends on campus would be with me, I became more and more excited about the possibilities and opportunities I would have on SST. In part because, and I kid you not, every student I heard talk about their SST experience described it as life-changing. And after having done SST myself, I would say the same. Initially, when I, like you, heard this, I was doubtful and kind of brushed it off. Like, how can 3 months really be that life-changing? And for me, there was no one big, extravagant moment where I knew my life had changed, but it was rather the peace and love that I was shown every day that made me realize that my identity had changed and that my sense of who I am and the life I want to live had been solidified. One of the best ways I can convey these subtle but meaningful changes is through this picture on the slide. This is a picture of the street, de los Madroños in Quito, and to the right was the street of my house, de las Uvias, and the court where we played soccer after class most days. To the left was the corner where my host parents and I met other classmates in our neighborhood to walk to class every day. I remember taking this photo one afternoon after my family had spent time with Emma and her host family. We were crossing the street to go back to our house, my arm linked with my host mom's, while my host dad and I made jokes and laughed to the point of tears. And I was in such awe of how at home I felt. I reached for my camera to capture the moment, the beauty of the street, our neighborhood, and the people I was with. I knew that I was going to want to look back and have an image to show people when they asked where I lived. But in looking back at the photo, I realized it has become more than where I lived. It was home. One reason I chose to share this particular photo from SST rather than one of the many others I have is due to its representation of this subtle shift. As I looked through my pictures to find one that I felt best represented the impact SST had on me, I wanted to find a photo with my host family to honor the relationships we formed and the love we share. But while scrolling, I noticed that the location for this image was labeled home, even though I had never entered my address into my phone. As I reflected on what this meant, that even my camera knew that this had become home, I realized a similar change had happened within me. I can't remember a point where it went from feeling like a guest to feeling like part of their family, when their house switched to feeling like my home. Since returning from Ecuador, I am constantly identifying changes within myself and the ways I understand both the concepts of home and family. I arrived in Ecuador excitedly, but also with apprehension, unsure of how I would navigate a world so different from my own. Yet, over time, I discerned that home isn't solely defined by a physical space or by our immediate family. It is about connection, it is about belonging, and it is about love. My Quito host family embraced me wholeheartedly, offering warmth and care as though I was their own daughter. Each shared meal, every laugh, and the frequent moments of vulnerability solidified my place in their lives, and theirs in mine, and expanded my perspective on what it means to belong and how I can provide that sense of belonging to others. As I look back on my time in Quito, the emotional impact of this experience is encompassing. There's not a single piece of my identity that hasn't been shaped by my time in Ecuador. I returned to the States not just with memories and new experiences, but with the complete confidence that home truly is where the heart is, and a piece of my heart will always be in these Quito streets and with the strangers who became my family.
Hello, my name is Carmen Campos. I'm a social work senior with an art minor, and this past May, I took a summer abroad to Ecuador. To be honest, before going abroad, I was extremely nervous. The only other time I had left the country was to visit my family in Mexico, but aside from that, I never traveled alone. I knew this experience was going to be hard, as a big part of me felt scared, anxious, intimidated by the thought of leaving with a group of students I didn't know and travel to another country being all by myself. Before I had left, I asked my mother to give me a blessing, to let me be safe, to let me be okay, and to please let me make friends on this trip. The first 2 weeks were the hardest, I think, since I was having difficulty adjusting to this new life, and I hadn't gotten to know my peers that well or just yet. However, week 3 proved to be different. You see, while on SST, we had the opportunity to take group trips to different locations in Ecuador. Our first trip was to a place called Mindo. They gave us a schedule outlining the different activities we would be doing on this trip, such as visiting a museum, touring a chocolate factory, visiting a coffee farm, planting trees, and hiking to see a waterfall. And while I've done many of these things, I have not gone hiking to see a waterfall. So I thought to myself, how hard could this really be? I would later regret this. At the beginning of the hike, we were told that if we wanted to get into the water, we could. And if we were struggling, we could go back whenever we wanted to. At first, the hike was going great. Being able to see the greenery, the nature around, it was amazing. And this wasn't until I realized how long of a hike this was and how tiring my legs were getting. I was worried that I would either get left behind since I was going too slow and I wasn't going to be able to go all the way, or that was what I was worried about. Because at some point, my legs began to physically hurt. It was only getting harder and harder to walk, and this was something I really wanted to do, but at this point, I wasn't sure if my sheer determination was enough. However, I realized that even though I was struggling, no one had left my side. Lauren continuously gave me words of encouragement, telling me, Carmen, come on, we can do this, only a little bit longer. And Leif was also there to lend me a hand when I needed that extra push. And he helped me control my breathing as I was struggling with that as well. Additionally, the rest of the group, while they had moved a bit ahead, they would stop to make sure that we were catching up. They would wait for us so that we can continue together. Never once did I feel alone or abandoned. By the time we had reached the waterfall, my body felt like it was ready to give up. My legs were weak, I was in so much pain with every step I took. Everything felt so sore, and at that point, the only thing I wanted to do was get in the water with the rest of the group. As soon as I took a step into the freezing water, all that pain and exhaustion that I was feeling felt that it was quite literally being washed away by the water. All that pain that I had felt was gone in an instant, and overwhelmed by this feeling of relief that filled my whole body. I could not stop laughing and smiling. I wasn't the only one feeling this, as everybody was running around in the water, laughing and having an amazing time. At that moment, I was so happy because even though I was struggling and going through this hard thing, in the end, I was able to feel a sense of relief and smile with everyone around me. Being able to accomplish this goal was so worth the reward. Even though studying abroad was hard, being able to make new friends, make connections, and experience new things was worth the reward. Thank you.
Good morning. So, as I start this, I want to share some information about me and my family and my mindset as I headed into SST. So, my grandfather, as part of his childhood, spent time in India, my grandmother in Haiti. And then later, when they were at GC, they both went to Belize for SST. After they got married, they moved to Dublin, Ireland. As a result, my mom spent the first 18 years of her life growing up in Ireland. From a young age, she always knew she wanted to be a missionary in another country, which led me and my brothers to grow up in South Africa. That was from my childhood. I was there from roughly ages 2 to 11. My cousin Cormac, who also went on SST with me, lived in India as a child for some years, and then later in Cambodia for a year while his parents led SST. The connections within my family and global service go on and on. I could tell even more stories about family members who have lived in other countries, but that's not the point. The point is that my family is comfortable being uncomfortable, going to unknown places and just figuring things out. I've grown up hearing stories from family members and just going from family members about being global citizens, building connections and deep, meaningful relationships with people very different from themselves. Global citizenship is a part of who we are. As I mentally prepared for SST, I knew it would be hard, strange, and uncomfortable. I had been a stranger before, right? And I thought I knew what it would be like. I used this as a crutch while in Goshen as I prepared for SST, to not really try in Spanish or to think deeply about my experiences that I would face. No matter how much effort I would put in while in Goshen, Ecuador would still be uncomfortable. Then January came around, and it was time to go. The first 3 days were different. The group stayed together, we had orientation, we had really good food, we traveled together, and we explored Quito. It felt more like a vacation than SST. But after those days ended, the real SST began. I hadn't had to speak Spanish yet, and when Saturday came and I had to move in with my host family, it was awful. That first weekend was awful. I couldn't understand or say anything. It felt endless. The weekend felt endless, even though it was just a day and a half. I'd expected discomfort, but it wasn't just uncomfortable. It was sad and lonely. I felt like a little kid that this really nice family had to take care of. I was a toddler. I felt comfortable and safe, but it was more than just uncomfort. I couldn't connect with them. That was uncomfortable. The pictures on the screen right now are of my first host family's house in Quito. This was on their roof, where laundry was hung, where we'd sometimes grill vegetables and meat for dinner, and where I would work out with my host dad. He loved to bike and stay active and had crafted a barbell. I would guess around a barbell around 40 pounds using concrete and PVC pipe. So this is where I was able to connect with my host family for the first time. So let's backtrack to that first weekend. The weekend ends, classes start on Monday, and it was a much-needed break from my host family. And after class, the dreaded trip back home began. Once I was home, I was sitting on the couch, as I had done for most of the weekend. At some point, I had finally mustered up the confidence to tell my host dad that I'm gonna go on the roof and lift by myself. I needed the time alone. But much to my dismay, my dad followed me up to the roof. But this was the best thing that he could have done for our relationship. Amid the breathing of lifting weights 9,350 feet above sea level, somehow talking and listening became easy. It became natural. I knew what words to say. I knew how to ask questions. As the sunset appeared and the stars came out, my dad started telling stories. And this became our nightly routine, lifting, talking, and just telling stories. A 40-pound homemade concrete barbell connected us. And then once we were done lifting and it was time for dinner, we'd go downstairs, and my dad would excitedly tell my host mom everything we had discussed and the connections we had made. And this would lead to more hours of conversation well into the night. The reason these moments are so memorable and stay with me is because I was able to find something with people I'd really struggled to connect with before. I thought I was going to be okay being uncomfortable, and that was just not true. Comfort is amazing and is something that we take for granted in our homes, our communities, and with our friends. Comfort is something that I was not expecting to find in Ecuador, but it's something I left feeling. I felt comfortable in a stranger's home and a deep connection. This happened over and over again throughout my time in Ecuador, with my coworkers on study who took me around town and made me try different Ecuadorian street foods on lunch break, with my second host family. I will never forget my second host mom telling me that she better get an invite to my wedding. The random kids at the park who helped me chase down the guy who stole my backpack when playing basketball one day, and then the many, many nights spent with the group playing games. The point is, I felt comfortable and at home in a place where I was not expecting to feel that. Thank you.
Hello again. That is a rock with a face drawn on it. And by far, it is the best thing I brought back from Indonesia. My story comes from the first 6 weeks of study. We just got done with class, and my host dad had invited me to go to a book launch at a friend's art museum. I said yes, of course, because that just sounded really fun, and I invited 2 of my other SST mates to join. What my dad didn't tell me was that the museum was also his friend's art studio and also his friend's house. And he had 2 of them that faced each other with a river in between. When we pulled into the driveway, it was covered in plants. It was like a tropical rainforest. We had to walk over a bridge to get into his house. And the inside was just covered in art, from floor to ceiling, and that's not even an exaggeration. He had painted every wood slat on the floor. The walls were covered in more picture frames than actual wall, and there were colorful light fixtures and giant Indonesian puppets hanging from the ceilings. It was incredible. I was a fan before I even met the guy. But as much as I wanted to explore more, we did walk straight to a dining table, and I remember feeling very intimidated, in awe, but intimidated by the atmosphere. The table was surrounded by the coolest looking guys. They're leaning back in their chairs, hair pulled in a ponytail. They're smoking cigarettes, dressed in long sarongs, which is like Indonesian skirt, and they were just chatting back and forth in Bahasa. My host dad casually greets them and introduces us to the man himself, Nasirun. Now, Nasirun, as we found out, is one of the most famous artists in Indonesia. His paintings and sculptures have sold for tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I have no idea how us 3 random Americans ended up having an exclusive dinner with him and also a private tour. And exploring Nasirun's house, his house, museum, studio, generally felt like walking into another world. It was so big. He had it like an oasis in the middle of his house. There were so many amazing sculptures and paintings. One of my favorites being the animal one on the left there, made out of instruments. And not to mention, there were cats everywhere. There you go, cats. They're just roaming. They were so cute. And fast forwarding a bit, my friends and I knew we wanted to get this guy's autograph, but we didn't have anything for him to sign. We had left all our stuff in the car. And I had joked about taking a rock from his garden and asking him to sign it, but it was not a serious suggestion. I mean, it'd just be rude to take something from this guy's house. But what if? It took me a little bit to build up the courage to ask. Ask my host dad to ask Nasirun, but when I did, to my relief, they both thought it was a great idea and encouraged us to find a rock. I found a hefty, flat, triangular one in their garden, and you know the rest. This whole experience was so completely unexpected. I mean, this wasn't even one of the organized class trips we have, just a random thing my host dad thought I'd enjoy. But it ended up being one of the most memorable moments, partnered with one of the best souvenirs that I got in Indonesia. And that's what I think is so special about SST program. Because SST places you in such a unique context, so far removed from Midwest Goshen, Indiana, you don't have to look far for a good story. This is especially true for a semester-long format. When you spend so much time in a foreign country, you open yourself to the way of life there. You learn about how the locals spend their days, what food your host family likes, or what random connections your host dad may have. And you also learn that the locals want you to have the best experience possible. They will share their lives with you, lend you a hand or a rock whenever you need it, and show you things you've never seen before and might never see again. So many remarkable, unbelievable, generational stories are there for the taking, and they'll practically come to you, and all you need to do is be there. Be there, be present, ask a friend to come with you. Who cares? Just give yourself chances to have your life changed. SST is something that we are so privileged to have here in Goshen, and I highly recommend you to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Every few days last semester, when I walked with members of my SST group to the corner store for ice cream, or played soccer at the neighborhood park immediately after class, I would look around, breathe deep, and think to myself, Naomi, it's literally 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, 75 degrees, sunny. You're in Ecuador with no mandate but to exist. Back in Goshen, everyone else is probably in the fraught, stressed about taking midterms. As we near the end of this convocation, you might be a little tired hearing about SST. We could wrangle people from all across campus to walk up here every morning to tell you stories about a lesson they learned that changed their lives forever, or a relationship they made that they continue to nurture today. I could stand here and say that a semester spent in another country, speaking another language, is hard, but worth it. That it challenges you and helps you grow as a person. But honestly, I'd just be dancing around what I desperately want to tell anyone and everyone who is considering a semester abroad. I believe that one of the most valuable things you can do for yourself while at Goshen College is to explore what's beyond it. There are a lot of things that make this place special. Of course, you're here for a reason, but I'd be remiss not to tell you that a study service term, a full semester, 13 weeks off campus, is one of GC's most exceptional assets. I urge you, when it comes to SST, count yourself in before counting yourself out. 8 months ago today, I was visiting a dog hospital in Cotacachi, Ecuador, for no particular reason other than that my host father wanted to show it to me and my service partner, Matthew. We chatted with volunteers and watched a small puppy get stomach surgery. I thought, I didn't see myself being here 8 weeks ago. A few days later, me and Matthew traveled with my host father deep inside the Ecuadorian cloud forest, named after the Intag River that ran through it. We spent a night in a remote, bare-bones cabin before waking up early to join in a community improvement initiative called a Minga, or collective work in the indigenous language of Quechua. We were nestled in between massive mountains. That morning, we had scaled the face, literally the face, of one of them. It was exhilarating to be there, drinking communal cups of soda passed between workers, shaking hands, and greeting each newcomer. It felt like a moment that would stay with me, a moment that I could point to for the rest of my life and think, yeah, I can remember that vividly. To be fair, not every day in Ecuador was surreal or even surprising. During our first 6 weeks of study, I spent most afternoons in Quito, sitting with my friends at a small restaurant, working on typical homework assignments and playing card games. Travel is not synonymous with adventure, Calm, mundane activities are still everyday occurrences. You're just experiencing them in a different place. But by joining an SST group, I did inherently gain knowledge, experience, and relationships that I never could have found in a classroom. For those of you tired of school, tired of Goshen, tired of rushed and memorable routines, do yourself a favor and slow your life down. Put yourself in a position where you will perk up, look around, and think, am I really here at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday? These few years will likely be some of the only times in our lives where we will be actively encouraged to travel. This is one of the only times in our lives where there are structures and scholarships in place with the sole purpose of making that travel more accessible. If you haven't considered a semester-long SST, give yourself a chance to imagine a possibility in which you could. It's not a decision to take lightly, but it's also not a decision you're going to regret. When it comes to SST, specifically at Goshen College, choose to first, before anything else, count yourself in.
So, as you've heard, these are the kind of incredible experiences that you can expect from spending a semester abroad. Not to sound like we're beating a dead horse here, but I hope that we have emphasized that this genuinely is an experience that you can only get right here, right now. No other college has an SST program like Goshen's, and at no other point in your life will you be able to travel in such an immersive and engaging way with a cohort of your peers that you already know and like.
And a semester abroad is a daunting thing. I know for myself, having lived in Goshen my whole life, that I was scared to be away from so long, living with strangers and learning a new language. But that's the great thing about spending 13 whole weeks in a new country. You don't have to figure it out right away. Take it day by day, learn a new word here, talk to your host family there, but take care of yourself. There isn't one right way to experience SST. And for me, it took about sometime in the second week where I finally felt like I belonged there and not a tourist. And if you're feeling concerned, all right. If you're feeling concerned with scheduling because you're an athlete or about financing the trip as a whole, know that there are resources and options available. The May, summer, or sequential options are great if you don't want to miss a season of your sport, and GC also offers many scholarships like the Gilman, Rotary, or Fund for Education Abroad that you can apply for. These scholarships cycle often and are very attainable, so submit something. And to sign up, if you're feeling inspired, you can sign up for SST by going to MyGC and finding the SST enrollment form link, or you can scan the top QR code there. The best advice I can give you is to plan ahead. If you're interested in a certain semester abroad option, check when it's offered, sign up early so you avoid any scheduling issues, and begin exploring financial aid options. You've heard it from the stories today, and you will continue to hear it, but SST is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it is so worthwhile, and we couldn't recommend it enough.
If you have any more questions, you can find us out in Schrock Plaza, where we'll have some traditional snacks from both Indonesia and Ecuador, made by students who were just traveling there. Food is an essential part of culture in general and family life. I personally learned an empanadas recipe that's been passed down through the women in my host family for generations. It's in moments like that that I realized I wasn't just a visitor, I was, if even briefly, part of the family. Now, no empanadas out there today, but keep your eye out because they may be making an appearance at a future event surrounding SST, so look out for that. So once you get outside, please pick one of the options to eat, and whichever you choose, You're gonna have to talk to them about SST, so consider where you maybe want to go. Now, Jen is going to come and explain the new way of swiping for Convo, so pay attention to that. Make sure you want to get your swipes. And then we hope to see you out in the plaza with any questions you might have.
Thank you.